Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. Excuse me. First and foremost, since today is Saturday, one second. It's Catterday! Saturday is Catterday and Catterday is Saturday. Okay, you can go back to bed now. Yeah. I anticipate scratches on my feet later for that. But anyway, I hope everyone is doing well. And as a reminder, uh, provided nothing changes, I will be appearing on Nerdette Newsstand's. March 8th, 1 second. Sorry. I'll be appearing on Nerdette's Newsstand's channel as a guest tomorrow, right? Today's 23rd? Yeah, today's 23rd. So I'll be on her channel tomorrow, the 24th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right? So we'll see what we're going to talk about or debate about. Probably, I would assume, um, current stuff like the Superman, both Supermen, I guess you could say, father and son, and other things. So we'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. So I saw this just now, and I wanted to just briefly address it, especially since it touches upon a bigger topic that's been brewing recently, which is about mockery and offense to certain marginalized groups, right? Especially with the Dave Chappelle special. Now, I haven't really covered all that, but I have seen, sort of bits and pieces of it online, and I think in that it to just sort of sum it up, generally speaking, that the people who are upset about Chappelle, first of all, I think it's gotten blown way out of proportion, as sadly these types of things do when social media attention and then regular media attention are hoisted, or probably the better term is foisted, upon these things. But to just be general about it, I think that while certainly people have a right to their sensitivities and they have a right to be offended, right? And there is a right to offend, which is what Chappelle does as a comedian, right? I do think that those who are, I would say, overly upset, right? Because not every person who is upset with his special necessarily has gone to the level that other people have, like walkouts and protest and all this other stuff. I think most people who were offended by him just go by the adage of, I was offended, I didn't like it, give it a negative review, don't watch it again, and move on with your life, right? But for those who have gotten so offended to the point that they're staging protests and walkouts and all this other stuff, and the head of Netflix has to make, statements saying that he's going to stand by Chappelle, but he's also, should have considered the sensitivities of his employees and all that stuff. You are missing Chappelle's point, and you are making his point at the exact same time, because you are more offended by what he said than by anything he's done, or the actions of individuals. You're upset over words, and that's fine. You want to walk out, you want to protest, you want to cancel your net, Netflix subscription. That is your choice and your right. But just understand, you're making his point. So there's that. But when it comes to this, I wanted to address this because being part Native American, while I certainly can't speak for other natives or other half breeds such as myself, I can speak for at least myself. And so I find this as a bunch of useless virtue signaling, and I'll explain why. So the issue seems to be that there's a video that's now out online of a white female teacher. RJ, make up your mind. Are you in or you out? I sound like my mother, I swear. But anyway, um, there's a video of this white teacher wearing like those like really cheap like do-it-yourself headdresses, right? Made of like paper, like you would do in like third grade arts and crafts, that type of stuff. Apparently, the reason she's dressed up like this and she's sort of like doing some sort of terrible caricature of a war dance or something is because she's trying to get the students to remember the acronym SOCOTOA, which is I remember from like math class in like eighth grade, and I never used it. Right. So apparently she's just playing on the Native American stereotype apparently to get the students to remember it. Having watched the 2 minutes of the video, I just found it to be cringe. Not like culturally offensive cringe, just cringe in general. I'm just like, is she having a mental episode? Like, I don't know. I think she was just being silly, maybe to entertain her students or to annoy them. Who knows? But apparently, because this has now hit social media and everybody wants to, stand up for natives, but nobody ever wants to actually try to improve their situation, we now have legislators putting out immediate press releases. And to my knowledge, this teacher has since now been put on leave over this. I think at best, you have the principal, talk to her privately, pull her inside, and go, look, don't ever do that again. Don't ever get taped doing that again. That was just plain cringe and stupid. Right? But let's address this. Remember, it's a press release. So it's all about looking good, not necessarily about doing good. But as of 2 days ago, right, says legislators respond to incident. That's not an incident. It's a teacher acting silly, right? That's all it is. It's not an incident. You know what's an incident? A violence at a school. That's an incident. This is simply silliness. But anyway, incident at John W. North High School, Riverside. Assembly member Jose Medina, Democrat, Riverside. Assembly maker Sabrina Cervantes, Democrat, Corona. And Assembly maker James Ramos, Democrat, Highland, released the following statement in response to a recorded incident at John W. North High School. We fully condemn the actions that took place at John W. North High School earlier this week. The teacher's behavior was highly inappropriate and offensive. Well, here's the thing. Offense is a subjective term. I agree it's inappropriate, right? I don't think it benefits any teacher to make yourself look silly because it's going to make it that much more difficult for the students to respect you, right? But as offensive, well, again, that's a subjective thing. Some people will be offended, some people will not. I personally wasn't offended. If anything bothered me, it was simply how cringe it was. But anyway, it says it is damaging, I should say. It is damaging and disheartening to see Native American and indigenous culture represented in such a trite and insensitive way. However, this is not an isolated incident, as such teaching practices, even in math classes, because again, she was trying to get them to remember the term Sokotoa, have been used across the nation. It is time that we stop this behavior. Indeed. Do you know how my kindergarten teacher taught us kids how to count? It was this. One little, two little, three little Indians, four little, five little, six little Indians, seven little, eight little, nine little Indians, 10 little Indian boys. So offensive. Just weeks ago, the state of California made ethnic studies a required course across California high schools. Unfortunately, for students of color, moments such as the one at John W. North High School are the few in which their heritage is represented in the classroom, despite how inaccurate and wrong they are. Because, white culture is never mocked, right? Whites are never mocked for their skin tone or the general idea that, especially when compared to blacks, white people are bland, right? White men can't jump, white men can't dance, right? They have no soul, right? The old joke about, how gingers have no soul, right? Or, cultural stereotypes like Italians in the mafia or the Irish in drinking. No, white people in America never get mocked for anything. Right? It says we need to ensure that students learn about themselves in positive, accurate, and appropriate ways. I agree. And it's up to the parents, right, of those children to expose them to positive, accurate, and appropriate depictions of whatever culture that student may come from. That's on the parents, principally speaking. That's not on the schools per se, right? And plus, with Halloween coming up, right, people are going to be in costume or wearing masks, wearing everything. Are we going to criticize every single person who comes to a party or comes to a school in some, stereotypical but culturally inaccurate costume, right? What about that? Right? What about that? That's what I'm asking. As members of the legislature and members of our community, we are fully committed to working with Riverside Unified School District to make sure that appropriate actions are taken and incidents like this never happen again. Oh, incidents like this will happen again. Okay. Here's my issue with this. First of all, the fact that it even reached the point of policymakers, politicians, having to make formal statements like this, having to do press releases, in my opinion, never should have got this far. Talk to the teacher privately, tell her that's inappropriate. Maybe dock her pay one check at worst. Move on with your day. It didn't have to go like this. But of course, like a lot of socially colored, or I don't know. But I guess just like a lot of racial issues today, right? People must overtly virtue signal their allegiance or their support for whatever group is offended, whether or not that makes sense. The funny thing is that now I will admit I don't know the cultural backgrounds of these individuals, but I don't see any names here that are distinctly Native American. These look to be Latinos. So you've got three presumably Latino uh, politicians trying to speak more or less on behalf of supposedly offended Native Americans in California. If there are native tribes or native individuals in California who were this offended, why not let them speak for themselves? Let them get their voices out. Why do you presume to speak for them? That's is my question. And probably most importantly, and this is what bugs me when politicians do this. And to me, it comes across as virtue signaling because they talk about how this teacher's actions were inappropriate and offensive, and they talk about how it's damaging and disheartening to see Native American and indigenous culture represented in such a trite and insensitive way. And there's a part of me that can agree with that. I, like many, am very tired of the stereotypical beads, buckskins, plains Indian stereotype. There is very little media, at least from what I've seen, right, that makes a distinction between the various tribal cultures, right, or depicts Native Americans as anything outside of that stereotype. Even Gargoyles, and I love that cartoon, leaned heavily into that stereotype with certain episodes. In particular, Cloudfathers, which involved Elisa's father and him sort of getting in touch with his with the culture he had turned his back on. And then there was another episode where they meet a young Native American man named Natsalani who has a very similar story of he left the tribe and now he has to come back home and reconnect to his heritage. And actually the episode might have been called Heritage. And all this other stuff, right? The general media depiction of a Native American in American media for the most part is either the tribal Indian stereotype or the person who's gone so far on the other end that they have no connection to their culture, right? They were raised in the culture, but they left it, right? So that tends to be the two extremes, and I admit it's annoying. It's annoying. But you know what's worse? The poor state of living for natives on the res. You know, the rampant abuse of drugs and alcohol, the, incidents of crime and violence, in particular rape, right? The whole, casino ownership thing. That's the new modern day stereotype, right? Those are the issues that bother me. Now, I didn't grow up on the reservation. I grew up in New York City, right? But for those who are on the res, that's what I worry about for them. Growing up in these growing up in poverty, basically, more or less, these very dangerous circumstances. What I worry about is that who outside of the Native American community? Because again, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think any of these individuals who have made this statement have any connection, right, or partnership with Native American organizations in California or tribe or representatives or anything of that sort. So when people who are outside of the tribes, especially when they're politicians, comment on this, my question is, what are you doing to help improve the actual lives, the real lives of real people, real modern day Native Americans living on the reservations? That's my question. Because it's easy to put out this statement and say that the depiction of a white teacher doing a silly war dance in a cheap homemade uh, feather headdress is offensive. But what's more offensive is the death rate. What's more offensive is the crime. That's what offends me. And what are you guys doing to help that? Since you're going to make a public statement that you guys are politicians, right? Legislators, right? Assembly members certainly have more clout or influence than I'll ever have. So, what are you doing to actually help these individuals? What are you actually doing to help Native American kids, men, women, people living on the res, people living outside of it, who are of native descent? What are you doing to actually help the real lives? You're so fixated on an offensive image, you're not showing any concern about the offensive living conditions people have to deal with day in and day out, right? The offensive living conditions that mold a culture that a young person is raised up in. That is what should be your concern more than anything else. Look, if we can get natives, co- collectively speaking, right, out of poverty and have a better culture overall, right, and start hearing more su- success stories instead of tragedies, I will gladly. It's like if we can trade that, like for example, you get to keep the silly Plains Indian stereotype, but what the natives get in return is like thriving culture, thriving uh, communities. Yeah, I think that's a great trade, and I think that that's what the focus should be on, trying to build up natives both internally, because that's the most important thing. A community, before anybody else can help from the outside, a community has to try to build itself up from the inside first. So you need help from within, and you need help from the outside as well to help uplift uh, Native American reservations in general. That, in my opinion, should be the biggest concern. And if we can do that, like if we can get to a point where the biggest issue we have with Native American peoples and their circumstances is offensive stereotypes in media, we will have been doing pretty damn good. So maybe we should try to get to that first. address the realities of a situation that it impacts many, many, many people, and worry less about some white teacher making a fool of herself in front of her classmates, so in front of her class, I should say, or offensive de- depictions in media. Let's deal with the real problem first. Is basically what I'm saying. But anyway, that's my take on it. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye. Oh, and one more thing, since I mentioned it at the beginning of the video and it's been about 20 minutes, so I'll mention it again. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I will be a guest on Nerdette Newsstand's channel. So I hope that we'll have a nice turnout, and I hope we'll have a good conversation or debate or whatever the heck it's going to be. So we'll see. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.